a shadow of its former self. Well, at least that's what some may say about the FV215B183, and today's video is going to showcase exactly how this tank performs currently within World of Tanks. So what is exactly special about the FV215B183? Well, the clue is in the name. 183mm gun means that it has 1450 alpha damage, which you can pump out really nicely onto a lot of the opponents that you'll be facing, although you do have to load HESH rounds, which are of course the premium rounds of this vehicle, and they have been significantly nerfed. Now, the whole precedent of this video and why it's a shadow is that this vehicle used to have an amazing gun. It used to have 286mm of pen with 1850 alpha, but they've of course reduced both the pen and the alpha on this vehicle such that it becomes a little bit, in fact a lot, painful when you're actually playing this vehicle. And in fact I would much rather play the FV4005, which is the kind of more turreted, more mobile, more flexible version of the FV215B183, albeit doesn't have the armor model that this thing has, so you don't typically bounce any rounds in that vehicle, but it still makes up for it in the gun statistics and why I've always really enjoyed playing it. But without further ado, what does this vehicle offer compared to a lot of the other tank destroyers at tier 10? Well, it's the fact that it does get this 1450 alpha, and it also gets fairly okay accuracy to have it. It's not like this is a super kind of dirt cannon. It is actually fairly accurate to be able to do 1450 alpha, and you can certainly rack damage up, and that's what this video is going to showcase, albeit, you know, showing why you may not want to just discredit this tank altogether, because there are definitely some benefits to playing this over something else. Now, I'm not going to say that this is innately overpowered or anything like that, because the kind of Death Star, as it's coined, is no longer a Death Star, to be honest with you. It's more of a, I don't know, more of a kind of weak star. I don't even know. But although we have just managed to one-shot an AMX-30B from full health by setting him on fire, we probably would have been able to, if high-rolled on the standard ammunition of the previous version of this tank, we would have been able to just one-shot him with HESH. But unfortunately that's not the case with this anymore, and you actually do have to rely upon getting some kind of lucky. Now, we do manage to hit the FV4005 and only deal 81 damage, and that's what these HESH rounds can do if you hit the gun of the vehicles that you're facing, which is definitely a problem, and it can definitely come in and be a pain in the arse, especially if you manage to hit someone's tracks or any spaced armor that someone may have. But you can still have the games where you feel like every single shot you're hitting and every single shot you're taking ends up working, and so you end up with games like this where you're able to come away with lots and lots of damage that maybe other tanks just wouldn't have been able to get in the same scenarios. I definitely don't think that this tank is very consistent. As I've already said, the FV4005 in my opinion is the better of the two vehicles, contrary to the fact that the FV actually doesn't have any armor. The other kind of statistics you lose from playing this are just a lot more, to the point where I just don't see any real point in playing this vehicle. But it's still a fun one. Of course, you can get the Badger at the same time as getting this vehicle, so it's always a kind of complimentary gift, so to say, of deciding to play the Tortoise. And it isn't much of a grind when you're having to play the Tortoise, because that is in fact probably one of the best tier 9 tank destroyers in the game, if not the best tier 9 tank destroyer in the game, in my own opinion. Obviously you may change, and obviously you may differ in opinion on the FV215B183. Maybe you think that the Death Star is way better than the FV4005, or maybe you think that this is actually just a terrible tank now, considering you don't have the capability of just being able to derp someone for nearly all of their hit points, just 70% now. It's still so fun to play though, and when you can successfully land penetrations on all of the opponents that you're facing, then yeah, you end up racking up some crazy numbers. And of course it does rely upon being able to hit them, and the rounds aren't the fastest, so yeah, it can be a little bit difficult at long ranges to be able to snipe with this tank, but primarily you don't really want to be sniping anyway with it. You're more of a close range kind of brawling tank. And you can see here aiming for the turret of the chieftain. Unfortunately, don't manage to pen. And this is where I would 100% recommend, if you want to play this properly and you want to play it competitively, is that you should always be using the loader equipment, which allows you to swap rounds. So you can swap between HESH, you can swap between AP, you could swap between HE, but I would never advise actually firing HE in this thing because it just has less pen and does no damage extra over the HESH round. So it's just a case of it will save you silver. But other than that, I really wouldn't recommend using it ever, and we definitely don't use it in this vehicle, as you see in us load full HESH rounds, because ultimately I'm not interested in dealing 1000 damage. If I want of that, I will have played the Jaegeru, which is just going to be way more consistent at dealing damage and also has a proper armor model over this. So we play it primarily as a kind of fully aggressive tank. And one that can just derp, so that's ultimately what I play it like. Of course you may differ, but yeah, this thing used to be crazy back in the day, and that's what this video is all about, is showing that you can still have good games, but it's just not got that wow factor like it used to, albeit we did manage to pen the AMX-30B and set him on fire. But other than that, it just feels a little bit lackluster. I mean, dealing 1450 alpha is really, really good, really fun, but it's definitely not something that is anywhere near being able to full health a lot of the tier 8s. And I'm saying that from a point of view of like excitement for the player playing, but remember, it's probably not fun for the other 29 tanks in the game that you're playing, that you're derping around just one-shotting everything that you hit. So there's always that. But yeah, I found this vehicle to be super, super interesting. It's nowhere near as good as I thought it would be, and of course even less so than when I originally saw this in the game, which was back like, I don't know, 3 years ago, when they nerfed this tank into the ground with the HESH nerf and also the alpha nerf. PC did it the other way, where I think they just nerfed the actual alpha damage, the penetration, and left the 1850 alpha. And yeah, console decided against it, just went with this version instead. But you can see there, even against some of the heavily armoured tank destroyers, if you can get around the back of them or the side of them, you can still deal the full amount of damage that you'd be hoping for. Now we do back up and turn around as quickly as possible, because artillery rounds love this vehicle. At the end of the day, it is based on the Tinderbox hull armour, which is the FV215B, which is the heavy tank of the American line as well. So you can pick that vehicle up. I actually really enjoyed it. And it was one of the tanks that I think is pretty underrated for a heavy, because it has the medium. It also got buffed, so there's no longer the problem with not having enough rounds in the vehicle, which was definitely super annoying. But yeah, there's not really that problem anymore. And what you can see here is just the end of the game, just mopping up the rest of the tanks on the enemy team. Of course, we've dealt 7,500 damage within this replay and got 1,260 assistance, which is nice. And if we'd been firing AP rounds as and when needed, we'd probably be nearer 9,000 in this game. But of course, we did decide to fire some HESH rounds. So the previous replay focused more on the aspect of the tank which was sitting there and being able to farm damage on a lot of opponents. This video, or at least this replay in this video, is going to showcase how you can use the tank in a bit more of an aggressive playstyle and also be able to defend a lot of the positions that maybe are key for you within World of Tanks. Now, we're focusing on, of course, Airfield, or at least the kind of revamped kind of map where they've just chucked in a load of bushes and called it Sunset Coast. But effectively what this map offers you is some early damage within this kind of setup. Now, we haven't got anyone that is being detected, and sometimes you can actually notice when people are there, and you can blind fire people if you see that some of the trees have been knocked down. And I always pre-aim this position if I'm playing in a heavy tank, a tank destroyer looking to pick off some of the heavy tanks on the enemy team. And that's really what you want with this vehicle, is to pick off some of the tanks that are going to be causing your team a pain in the backside. And actually you can see here the E75 moving along and coming towards. We aim at the turret at the side of him. Unfortunately don't manage to pen it. Yet again, a reason why you should always carry AP rounds, because I would have 100% swapped to my AP rounds there. Now, one thing that you should always note when you're in this sort of view is that if you see a tank like the E50 always try and avoid looking directly at them, because that will light up that they're targeted. Now we don't really care about that because we can just take him out anyway, because he decides to YOLO across the middle, and of course picking up an extra 1200 damage within that shot. So really nice, managed to pen him. And from here, what we're doing is just trying to support and provide some covering fire for our teammate in the AMX 13105, which, of course, as you saw there, didn't end up very well for the AMX 13105. And when you've got a 23-second reload to deal your damage and you're only dealing 600 damage with a DPM effectively, if you were to do that every single time of 1800, then yeah, this can be very annoying to actually play. One thing that is always nice is picking up the enemy light tank that's going to be pestering you and spotting you throughout the entire game, so getting rid of him was really nice. Now, having got a pretty substantial reload, there's not a lot I can do for the Object 277 on my team, but what I can do is try and set up for this M48A5 pattern, who's going to be moving up. Now, we know that there is a rock there, so there's no point looking over there, but I'm not entirely sure if we'll get the view range to be able to deal with him. And with this enemy E50 coming up, obviously triggered that there's another E50 in the game that had just been taken out. It gets taken out again, so that's 2 E50s taken out in this replay, which is always very nice. And I always enjoy it when you can take out some of these vehicles that decide that they're just going to try and YOLO you. Never understand why they do it, but they do. And yeah, we managed to take both of them out in the game, which is nice. Now, at 3,600 damage, it would not be a terrible game if I was to be removed right from here from however many hit points I have left. But we're not having to deal with that because we do have some support from our team, so we can kind of get forward and we can do something within this game. Now, there is a an M48 pattern on the enemy team, the M48A5, and he is in a pretty annoying position for our team, but he does expose himself on the left hand side to being hit by a lot of the rounds of the enemy team. But what we do have in this is the ability to try and pump out some damage. If he makes a mistake, if he pulls back, or if he does something silly, then we'll be able to deal that damage. Now, unfortunately for him, he will be doing that in just a second, and yes, we do shut him down from the 570 hit points that were left on his vehicle. So that brings our total up to 4,200, and at this point in the game, in the FE215B103, it's all about trying to find the opportunity with the highest health tank on the enemy team, and if you can do that, then you will have good games. And often the best games that you have in the FV is when your team is losing but the enemy team have not lost any health and they're just coming towards you, and you can pump them every single time and get damage. Now, you saw there we didn't manage to pen the Chieftain, and once again, if we'd been firing AP in this thing, which I highly recommend, but we were just doing it for the pure actual excitement value of playing the FV, we would have been able to get some damage. And in fact, maybe it would be more exciting to just consistently deal damage. I'm not entirely sure, but at the end of the day, it was really good to give it a go and see how we could fare with just the Hesh rounds. Of course, back in the day, you would have easily been able to pen the Chieftain with the Hesh rounds because you got an extra 70 pen basically. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore, and also you didn't get the alpha damage to really back up and make the Hesh rounds worth it as much. But you can see here, we're after this Chieftain. If we can suck the last hit points off of him, then yeah, that'll be nice. And of course, we do that. A very expensive enemy taken down there, since it costs 8,800 for every shell that you fire with the Hesh rounds. Of course, it's significantly cheaper if you fire just the standard rounds, which are just AP, and they actually can be a little bit good anyway, so there's always that. We do find a Mouse on full hit points, and once again, if we'd been loading AP, this would be a much better scenario. Now, you're seeing me do here is kind of go, where can I hit the Mouse? The lower plate's not a weak point. We do know that if we can splash onto his turret and hit down into the engine deck, we'll probably get the most amount of damage we possibly could with this vehicle without spending an age just trying to actually get a shot onto the Mouse. There's a Turan on the enemy team still alive, and there is of course this Mouse who could come back, we never know. Of course, he is AFK at this point, and we've got a Grilla behind him who low rolls, which is lovely because now that means that we could finish him off potentially, and we do, and the Mouse does appear to come back right at the end, but it doesn't matter for him because he is gone, he is out of the game. and on 5,500 damage I'm fairly happy with how we've gone so far. But of course we did see that there was a Turan on more hit points, and at this point I probably should be thinking, well, if I just stay here they'll be popping up left, right and centre and we can play some rounds into them, but get a little bit too aggressive at this point, and I decide, nope, I'm going to them, I'm going to deal damage to them, I'm going to be the big balls. And of course when you start making brash decisions in World of Tanks, it never usually ends up very well. We've got the support from 2 heavies here in the T110E5 by the looks of it, and the E100, both on a one-shot to the vehicles that are on the enemy team. The Object 705A does come around the corner, and once again, if I'd had AP rounds we could have taken them out. And then the Object 268 version 5 comes around, and of course because we don't have AP rounds we get taken out, and we would have been able to deal the last bit of damage on him. And in fact the Hesh rounds probably ended up taking me out in that game because of the amount of shots we could have finished off the enemy team, but because we didn't manage to pen, or because we genuinely just didn't have any areas to pen, we ended up losing, or at least losing the hit points on our vehicle and being taken out from this game. Now there is just 2 tanks left alive. It is the Object 268 and of course the Turan. Let's jump ahead to the victory screen. So there we go, the victory screen, a pretty decent one. Of course we did come top with 6,025 damage, the Gorilla did well as well with 7,000, but of course we did pick up a Top Gun and the Mastery Badge and the Reaper Medal, and we did block just 390 damage in that game, so it wasn't even like it was worth it. But there we go, the former OP Death Star now becoming kind of more like a chicken star, to be honest with you. It's not very good, and I definitely wouldn't recommend this vehicle to the majority of players. If you want the 183 gun, I'd probably go with the FV4005, but there we go. Hopefully it's showcased this vehicle and how it used to be good, but probably not so much anymore. There you go. I hope you join me in the next video, and I'll see you there. Goodbye.